Hello everyone, welcome to another video of solving Cambridge IGCSE Chemistry Paper 6 Alternative to Practical May-June 2020 0620 Paper 61. Question number 1. A student investigated the dyes contained in different colored inks using chromatography. Water was the solvent. The diagram shows how the student set up the apparatus. We have the baseline drawn in ink: red, orange, yellow, green, blue, purple, black, water, chromatography paper. As we can see that the baseline is drawn in ink, this is a mistake. That's because the baseline should be drawn in pencil. Alright, another mistake is that we can see the solvent is on top of the baseline, which is another mistake. The question says identify two errors in the way the student set up the apparatus. Part B. The student then carried out the chromatography correctly. The diagram shows the result. Which ink contains the greatest number of soluble dyes? The ink that contains most amount of spots will have greatest number of soluble dyes. So black contains most number of spots. So the answer will be black. Which two inks are made of single soluble dye? Any ink that has a single spot are made up of single soluble dye. So yellow is made up of single soluble dye and blue is made up of single soluble dye. So yellow and blue. From the chromatogram, it is not possible to tell if the red ink contains different dyes. Suggest how the experiment could be changed to find out if the red ink contains different dyes. Since the particular solvent that we have used, the red ink is not soluble in it. So rather what we can do is we can use a different solvent. Question number 2. A student investigated the reaction between dilute hydrochloric acid and two different aqueous solutions of sodium carbonate, solution E and solution F. 3 experiments were done. Usually in this kind of experiment, keep your eyes open. Either one of this particular solution will be more concentrated than the other. A. Experiment 1. A burette was filled up to 0.00 mark with dilute hydrochloric acid. Using a measuring cylinder, 25 cm³ of solution E was poured into a conical flask. Alright, so we must always understand that using a measuring cylinder is a quick method. However, measuring a 25 cm³ volume is better done using a burette or a pipette. So that can be an error later on down the road. 5 drops of thiophthalate indicator were added to the conical flask. Dilute hydrochloric acid was slowly added from the burette to the conical flask while the flask was swirled until the solution just changed color. Use the burette diagram to complete the table for experiment 1. We can see initial reading was 0 and final reading is 10.2. For experiment 2, the conical flask was emptied, rinsed with distilled water. The burette was refilled with dilute hydrochloric acid. The experiment 1 was repeated using 5 drops of methyl orange indicator instead of thiophthalate indicator. Use the burette diagram to complete the table for experiment 2. So we can see initial reading is 5.5 and the final reading is 25.9. So the volume used is 24.4. Experiment 3. The conical flask was emptied and rinsed with distilled water. The burette was refilled with dilute hydrochloric acid. Using a measuring cylinder, 25 cm³ of solution F was poured into the conical flask. 5 drops of methyl orange indicator were added to the conical flask. Dilute hydrochloric acid was slowly added from the burette to the conical flask while the flask was swirled until the solution just changed color. The initial reading is 2.4 cm cube, and the final reading is 33 cm cube. So final reading 33.0 and initial reading 2.4. Part B. What color change was observed in the conical flask for experiment 2? So from experiment 2, since we are using a methyl orange, alright, methyl orange gives a yellow color in a base, and methyl orange gives, for base, methyl orange gives yellow, and for acidic condition, methyl orange gives orange or red or pink. Any one of them is the correct answer. Part C. Compare the volumes of dilute hydrochloric acid in experiment 2 and experiment 3. Explain any differences. So in experiment 3, we see that we used 30.6 cm cube of hydrochloric acid, and in experiment 2, we have used 20.4. So 30.6 divided by 20.4, that is 1.5 times. So solution F is more concentrated than solution E, exactly 1.5 times more concentrated. Part D. Determine the simplest whole number ratio of volumes of dilute hydrochloric acid used in experiment 1 and 2. Ratio experiment 1 is to experiment 2. 1 is to 2. As we can see, the volume used for hydrochloric acid is 10.2 for the experiment 1. For experiment 2, 20.4. So 20.4, and then, if we have 10.2, if we ratio it, then it's going to be 1 is to 2. Part E. What volume of dilute hydrochloric acid would be required if experiment 3 was repeated using thermophthalin indicator instead of methyl orange indicator? So for the first experiment, when using thermophthalin indicator, we require 10.2. When repeating the same experiment using methyl orange, we require 20.4. So thermophthalin requires exactly half of whatever required for methyl orange. Alright. So in this case, to do this particular answer, we'll have to divide. Then experiment 3's answer 30.6 divided by 2. So the answer will be 15.3. Since the unit is missing, so unit must be provided. Part F. The conical flask was rinsed with distilled water between each experiment. Why was the conical flask rinsed? So basically, every experiment, alright, once we dump that particular experiment reagent, to remove any residue from the previous experiment, we can wash it with distilled water. Part 2. Why does it not matter if a little distilled water is left in the flask after it has been rinsed? Distilled water does not affect the reaction or the quantity of this amount of E or F that is going to be used in that experiment, so it can be there. Part G. State two sources of error in the experiments. For each error, suggest an improvement that would reduce the error. Source of error number 1. Well, as we have already discussed, the first source of error was using a measuring cylinder for measuring the 25 cm cube volume. Now, measuring cylinder is how to say this is it's a problem. So instead of using a measuring cylinder because of its error, alright, we can use a pipette in place of the measuring cylinder because we are measuring a fixed volume of 25 cm cube each time. And the source of error 2 is not repeating the experiment to get concordant result. The improvement for the source, Error number 2 would be to repeat and find average. Question number 3. Two solids, solid G and solid H, were analyzed. Solid G was copper to carbonate. Tests were done on each solid. So already we know that solid G is copper and then there is carbonate present. For H we do not know. Complete the expected observation. Solid G was placed in a boiling tube and excess of dilute sulfuric acid was added to the boiling tube. Any gas produced was tested. So because there is presence of carbonate, it will give carbon dioxide. Because there is presence of copper 2 plus ions with the sulfuric acid, basically the copper sulfate solution will have a blue color and this solid will disappear. Also along with that, because of the carbonate and because of the carbon dioxide gas, we are going to see effervescence. Part B. Identify the gas produced in A. So the gas produced, because we are producing the gas from carbonate, so definitely it is carbon dioxide. Part C. Aqueous ammonia was added slowly until in excess the solution produced in A. Observation. Okay, so when we add aqueous ammonia, few drops is gonna produce a blue precipitate. So blue precipitate forms after a few drops of addition of ammonia, and then precipitate dissolves to give a darker blue solution in excess ammonia. Now test on solid H. Tests were done and the following observations were made. First of all, flame test produces yellow flame. Yellow flame is an indication of presence of sodium ion. Some of solid H was placed in a boiling tube. The boiling tube was heated strongly. Condensation appeared near the mouth of the boiling tube. This is an indication of water of hydration. So it's a hydrated salt. Solid H was dissolved in distilled water. The solution was divided into two equal portions. About 1 cm³ of dilute nitric acid followed by a few drops of aqueous silver nitrate were added to the first portion of the solution. The solution remained colorless. So dilute nitric acid followed by silver nitrate is a test for halide. And since there is no halide present, so the solution remained colorless. About 1 cm³ of dilute nitric acid followed by a few drops of aqueous barium nitrate were added to the second portion of the solution. White precipitate forms. Dilute nitric acid followed by barium nitrate is a test for sulfate. White precipitate indicates sulfate present. What conclusion can be made from the results in test 3? So the test 3, we can say that there is no halide present. Part E. What conclusions can be made about solid H from the results in test 1, 2 and 4? So we can, from test number 1, we can conclude that there is sodium ion. From test number 2, we can conclude that it is hydrated. And from test number 3, we can conclude that there is sulfate present. So we can say hydrated sodium sulfate. Question number 4. Cobalt, manganese and nickels are metals. They react with dilute hydrochloric acid to form hydrogen gas. Plan an investigation to find the order of reactivity of these three metals. You are provided with samples of each metal, dilute hydrochloric acid, common laboratory apparatus. Your plan must make it clear how your investigation will be fair test and how you will use results to place the metals in order of reactivity. So to focus in this particular experiment, we must focus on this particular thing. Because they said that we must ensure a fair test, hydrochloric acid was added to a beaker. And for a fair experiment to take place, same volume, same concentration of hydrochloric acid was used in all experiment. All reactions were carried out at the same temperature and same number of moles of metals were added for each experiment. Even though same number of moles of metals does not necessarily mean same mass of metal. Same surface area of metal was used, so all metals were used in powdered form. The timer was started when the solid metal was added. The timer was stopped when all the solid has reacted. The metal that finishes reaction in the shortest amount of time is the most reactive metal. This is how we're going to find out which metal is the most reactive and put it in the reactivity series. Guys, thank you for watching the video. If you like the video and if you like videos like this, please subscribe the video, subscribe the channel, and like and share the video. Share it with your friends, which can help them as well. All right, and stay with us. See you in the next class.